So my name is Andy Salis. I'm the Humane Educator for DuPage County Animal Services. I'm also a certified dog trainer and a shelter behavior affiliate. And I actually have a master's degree in behavioral science as well. So I love sharing everything that I know about animals to help either current pet guardians or future pet guardians form the best possible relationship with their animal. And if you're in the process of selecting an animal, I hope that this talk will help you select the one that's appropriate for your family. So today we're going to be talking about preparing for a puppy. And this conversation could really be an all-day seminar. There's a lot of information to learn. So I've tried to pick and choose what I feel is most important to share with you this evening. And of course, if you have any questions, throw them in that Q&A function, and I'll try to get through as many as I can at the end of the presentation. And I tell everyone, please, if you have any questions that come up later on, you think of tomorrow, feel free to email me. So my email is here on the slide. It's humane.education@dupageco.org. And that will get you directly to me. I'm always happy to help out. Even if it's a question that pops up 6 months from now, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll help you to the best of my ability. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, there we go. All right, so you're here because you're expecting a puppy. So adding a puppy to your family can be a really fun and exciting time. I remember when I was a kid and I got my first puppy, it was, I think, one of my best childhood memories. It's a great experience for everyone involved. But there's always going to be a but when it comes to puppies. Puppies can be an immense amount of work. So really, it's important that you know what you're getting into before the puppy comes home, that you understand what realistic expectations you should have for the puppy. So everybody's prepared, everybody's set up for success, and there isn't any frustration or upset if the puppy is not quite what you thought you were getting into. So serious planning and education is absolutely needed. So for any of you that have kiddos that are pining for a puppy and are really playing that card to mom and dad to try to get a puppy, get them some books. Go to the library, check them out, do a lot of internet research, look for pet professionals, and make sure that you're doing your education to make sure that you know what you're getting into, and not just you, but everybody in the family. So this will be a common theme as we go through the presentation. Make sure you're thinking before you do. So puppies should definitely not be an impulse addition to your family. So again, common theme, I want to see a lot of research before a puppy comes home. And when you're doing your research, you really want to identify reputable sources. Sometimes just to see what the general public is learning about animals, I'll do a random Google search. And I typically have to go through 5 or 6 pages before I get to something that I know is reliable. So make sure you're not taking everything at face value, check your sources. And it's a good idea to seek out pet professionals. So veterinarians are a good resource when you're learning about puppy care, especially for that medical side. So puppies are definitely going to need a little bit more initially than they would if you were adopting an adult dog. So you're going to be looking at vaccinations and boosters, potentially spaying or neutering. So it's a good idea to have your veterinarian on board. Veterinarians are also a really great resource if you are looking for a specific breed. I know we all have that dream dog that we want. So if you're going for that breed, make sure you're talking to your veterinarian so you're prepared for any potential hereditary issues that are common in that breed, illnesses that tend to pop up in that breed. It'll help you be prepared for any future financial expenses, and it'll get you prepped to watch for any known symptoms of those conditions. Shelters and rescues are also great resources. Most will have puppies available for adoption or can send you in the direction of somebody who does. And they're going to be able to give you all the knowledge that they have about setting that puppy up for success in a home, establishing a good training program. And if you're adopting from a shelter or rescue, you're going to get that puppy's whole life story. Especially if that puppy grew up in a foster home, that foster will likely write you a novel about all of those puppies' likes and dislikes. So you'll really get to know your animal. So when you are looking for information and seeking out these reputable sources, really what you're looking for is what to expect as a new puppy guardian. So part of that is going to be daily husbandry. So what you should expect in terms of feeding, grooming, how regularly your pet needs to be bathed, what type of activity level they have, all of your general basics. You're going to want to learn about medical care, especially if you do have a particular purebred dog in mind that you really want to bring home. No judgment, we all have our favorite types of dogs. Go and get what you want, but make sure that you are prepared for any known, again, hereditary conditions or conformation issues that they may have. And then just know your basics about vaccines, boosters, and deworming schedules, so you know that you are meeting all of your puppy's medical needs as they grow and develop. Make sure you are identifying reputable trainers, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Training is going to be so crucial to your puppy's developmental success and in building that bond with your puppy as well. And then, of course, a big thing that I could talk all day about, and we'll mention it throughout this presentation, is make sure you have a good grasp on enrichment. So this is something that is often overlooked for dogs. We think walks around the block and maybe a little bit of fetch in the backyard is enough for them. And it can be for their physical needs, but we often forget to engage them mentally as well. And when you have a puppy, that's going to be very critical because you're getting them at the point of most rapid development in their brain, and you need to engage that brain so it develops in a healthy manner. So having a lot of mental enrichment will really be key to raising a well-balanced, mentally healthy puppy. So I did want to throw this out there, although we are ending our sheltering in place orders. A lot of people's schedules are still a bit wonky. Many people are still working from home or maybe only spending partial time at work and then more time at home than usual. And because of that, shelters and rescues have actually seen an increase in adoptions, which is awesome. But it does come with some special considerations. So you do get to spend more time with your pets. And if you're bringing a puppy into your home, that may be to your benefit because you'll have all of this free time to really work on house training, to establish that bond, maybe even get them through a training class over the summer. However, this extra time at home does not represent what is normal for most households. So it can establish an unrealistic expectation, especially for your puppy, who's pretty brand new to this world in general, is going to be super brand new to your house. And if you spend pretty much 24/7 with them, they're going to grow up thinking that that's the norm and they're going to expect that. So we might be setting our puppies up for failure by bringing them home when we're home all day. Now, my honest answer is we really don't know how this is going to affect animals, not just puppies, but all of our household pets, because we've never seen anything like this before. We've never seen the circumstance where people are with their animals 24/7, but we are preparing for some issues with anxiety as people leave the home and go back to work. So keeping that in mind, if you bring a puppy into your house, make sure you're trying to maintain as realistic of a schedule as possible. And you can do that really by encouraging a lot of independence with your puppy. You want to reward them for settling in a quiet space. You want to spend some time, if you are going to go the crate training route, which I support, but it is a personal choice for everybody. If you're going to go that crate training route, you want to take this time while you're at home, set your puppy up in a crate in a room that you are not in, and ask them to lay in there quietly for 5 minutes to start, then maybe 10, 20, 30, but just get them used to being separated from you and make sure that separation time is awesome for them. So it should be relaxing. We want to put on some soft music. They should have a comfy space to lay down. They get a really cool chew toy or a special bone, something that makes it enriching and fun for them to be there while they're also spending time away from you. You also want to make sure that you are stepping outside of the house periodically and taking that time away from your puppy. You can go to the store, take a walk without your puppy in tow, or even just go sit outside and enjoy the nice weather while your puppy is indoors. It's just a good idea to set up these realistic expectations and give your puppy the self-confidence that he or she needs to be on their own and not feel anxious about it. All right, so that being said, I would really like to start off this presentation by discussing some of the developmental stages that puppies go through, many of which will be experienced before you pick your puppy up. But I feel that this is valuable information because it'll help you assess the quality of the organization that you're getting your puppy from, whether that be from a shelter rescue or a professional breeder, because they'll be able to discuss with you each developmental stage of the puppy and what was done to help encourage healthy growth in the puppy during that stage. And if you find at any point that these developmental markers have not been reached in the puppy you're hoping to take home, that doesn't mean that you have to overlook that puppy and move on to another, but it might mean that there's going to be a little bit more work on your end as a new puppy guardian when that puppy comes home. So this is where we'll focus at least a portion of our presentation for this evening. Now, to start us off, before we get into the nitty-gritty of puppy developmental stages, I like to remind everybody that puppies are babies. So that's going to mean, just like with human infants, there will be poop. There will be a lot of poop, and probably not in locations that you want to see it. That's part of the puppy's growing pains. They will learn about house training, but we have to set our expectations pretty low in the beginning because they actually don't have the physical ability to hold it as well as we'd like them to. So be prepared for accidents, have cleaning supplies, meaning enzymatic cleaners and paper towels are your best friend. Make sure those are on hand before puppy comes home. You are also going to enjoy sleepless nights when you bring home your puppy. Just like we would expect with an infant, puppies are no different. And always keep in mind when you're bringing your puppy home, regardless of where they came from, this is going to be a huge transition for them. For many puppies, when you bring them home, they're traveling a great distance. They just left mom and siblings. That's a lot of change for any animal, let alone a young, still developing one. So be patient with them when they keep you up all night long. They're not having a good time either, but it's really important that we expect that as our puppies come home so we don't get frustrated with them. And of course, your stuff is going to get chewed on. So puppy proofing is crucial. And you'd be surprised what they can get into. So everything that you love and hold dear should be up. So make sure it is out of that puppy's reach, behind closed doors, or I promise the puppy will get into it and find some way to chew it up. And of course, puppies are going to try your patience. Just like I'm sure all parents can admit, their children try their patience from time to time. Puppies are going to do the same. We just have to remember to bite our tongues, to try to stay as patient with them as possible, and to always work positively with our puppies so we create a well-developed, healthy, confident adult dog as they grow. And of course, make sure that you're remembering learning is incremental for all species. So it doesn't happen all at once. It occurs in stages. There's usually going to be a 1 or 2 step forward and then a 3 or 4 step backwards. That's what occurs in learning for all animals and humans across the board. And we know that with our own children, right? So we send our children to school for a minimum of 12 years to prepare them for adulthood. For most of us, we go to school even longer than that. But we expect our puppies typically to be well-established pets in our home within a week or 2. And that's just not a realistic expectation. So puppies are going to need that same consideration, patience, and care. And you have to make sure that you are working with them at their pace. So even as we go through all of the developmental stages of puppies, remember, puppies don't read the textbooks. So I will give you defined periods of time where stages are supposed to occur, but every animal is an individual, and you have to work with your puppy at the stage that they're in and at a pace that they're comfortable with. Now, understanding developmental periods, though, will set you up for success because you'll have at least a generalized idea of what your puppy is capable of and where they should be at in their learning process. So that way you can have realistic expectations and hopefully avoid any frustrating experiences. So let's go ahead and kick off our puppy developmental stages with the first one, which will be their neonatal period. And this is what we refer to as the newborn phase for our puppies. The neonatal period occurs from birth to about 12 days. And in this time, we have to remember that our puppies are completely helpless. So again, you probably won't know your puppy at this stage unless you're working with a breeder ahead of time. Many breeders, if you've established an interest in a litter, they'll actually let you come out and visit the puppy while they're still with mom. If you're working with a shelter or rescue and are interested in fostering, you may encounter puppies this young, but otherwise this will be a stage that you are going to miss in your puppy's development. So again, at this stage, they need mom, they need each other, and they really don't do a whole lot, honestly. So neonatal puppies have very limited motor skills. They mostly just squirm everywhere. And I've known many neonatal puppies that have actually gotten themselves flat out stuck on their backs and need assistance to roll over. So they're not very functional at this stage. 90% of their time is going to be spent sleeping, which if you are able to know your puppies at this age, it is important to observe their environment. Make sure they're provided with ample soft places that are warm and comfortable to sleep in, that they're living in dim light, and that any noises in the environment are relatively low. The rest of the time they are going to spend nursing with mom. So puppies pretty much sleep all day. They wake up periodically, they nurse, mom stimulates them to go to the bathroom, and then they conk back out again and they sleep the rest of the time. So while very cute, neonatal puppies aren't terribly exciting. Now, in this stage, even though they're not super aware of their environment, periods of short handling can increase motor development, and some varied stimulation can increase social skills and confidence. So even though you won't know your puppy at this stage, you can still inquire about what resources they were provided when they were neonates. So were they being handled by people? What was the handling like? What was their environment like? Did anything ever change? And because these puppies are right now blind because their eyes are closed and largely deaf because their ear canals have not fully opened, we can still provide them some stimulation by changing out their bedding, providing slightly different textures. We can gently change the lighting in a room, and we can start to play some soft music. They may or may not be able to register it, but these are ways that puppies can be stimulated in this neonatal stage. A quality breeder will be able to discuss what they have done with the puppies in this phase, and shelters and rescues, if they had the puppies since birth, will be able to do the same as well. Now, from the neonatal period, we then move into the transitional period, and this is where puppies really start to see the world. It occurs between 13 and 20 days, and it really begins when your puppy's eyes open, which for most puppies is almost spot on at about 13 days. Some puppies are precocious and they pop those eyes open a little bit earlier. Some puppies are a little sleepier and they'll keep those eyes closed a little longer. But we typically see about 13 days, puppies' eyes are open and they're starting to look around and learn about the world. Their ear canals will also be fully open so they can hear, although that sense of hearing is still going to be developing as they continue to grow. They can also respond to taste and smell, so their world is really opening up quite a bit here. They will also be able to walk, but they'll be very wobbly at this stage. So you'll see a couple steps and then they'll fall down, and a couple steps and they'll fall down again. Now, during this time, it's important that novel stimuli are introduced, but they need to be introduced in a positive and gentle manner. So this can be accomplished by providing age-appropriate toys. This can be accomplished by providing things like knotted towels, which are a favorite of mine. So puppies can work on those burgeoning puppy teeth by chewing on the towels without damaging them, without damaging their teeth. They can drag the towels around. They can mock fight with them a little bit. It's a pretty cheap and easy toy for young puppies that they seem to have a blast with. And at this stage, we can actually become novel stimuli for our puppies. They can see us, they can hear us, they can even smell and taste us if they would like. So this is a time when we can really start to pick them up and cuddle. And because they're still reliant on mom, but just a little bit more independent, we can monopolize some of their time by cuddling them and showering them with affection without damaging any of their developing social skills. From our transitional period, we move into an awareness period. And you'll see this period is only from 21 to 23 days. And that's because it actually overlaps with other developmental periods that we'll talk about here in just a moment. But when awareness begins, it will actually continue through some of the following stages that we'll discuss. We're really going to see a lot of learning here. So this is when puppies are going to develop most rapidly. And it really does seem to happen overnight. You may be out with your puppies one day and they're barely able to get up and walk around without falling. The next day you come out and all of a sudden they're proficiently bounding about in their whelping box. Their growth is rapid and sometimes shocking. They will be able to use a sense of light. So you will actually see puppies respond to shadows. You may see them cry when the lights go out all the way in their room. So you will see responses to that stimuli. And their hearing will continue to develop and improve. Now, at this stage, stability is absolutely crucial. So even though these puppies seem more independent, they're definitely more mobile. You may even see them chewing on things more, perhaps even exploring mom's crunchy food if they can find it. They still need their mom, they need to nurse, and they definitely need to be spending time with their litter mates. Here, again, we can introduce even more stimuli, but we want to make sure we're not overwhelming the puppies. So this is another question to ask for shelters, rescues, or breeders. See what they've done to really engage their puppies' brains during this period. One of my favorite things to do is just to introduce a new surface each day. So carpet, a blanket, a rug, maybe some exposure to some tile or hardwood floors. That's a great way for a puppy to get tactile stimulation. They get to sniff around on these new floors, and they actually get to explore their own balance and mobility on these different surfaces. So it's very mentally engaging, and it's actually also setting them up for success in a home when they do eventually strike out on their own. I can't tell you how many young dogs I've seen that get to a new home and panic because the home is all hardwood floors and all they've ever known is a whelping box with carpet remnants or old blankets in it. So it's really important that they do get some exposure to new things, particularly surfaces, at this age. Now, during this time, we're also going to see a lot of socialization skills developing. So we'll see this occurring with dogs and then also with people as well. So that will mark our next step. So you can see primary socialization actually overlaps with our awareness period, and it occurs between 21 and 49 days, which is about 3 to 5 weeks. So we're still going to see a lot of rapid development in our puppy. And in this stage, they are really learning how to dog. So it is important, if you are adopting a puppy, that you're aware of what their living situation was during this phase, if you can get that information. Some rescues may not have that because they may not have acquired the puppies by this time, but breeders definitely would. This stage is very important because of that learning how to dog factor. So during this time, puppies are going to be learning a lot of species-specific behaviors. So they're going to learn how to chase and wrestle and bark. And one of the most important things, they're going to learn how to bite. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the term bite inhibition. Now, many folks think that that means a dog has learned to not bite. And that's actually not what bite inhibition is. Bite inhibition refers to a dog's awareness of the pressure they're applying when they bite. So when puppies play with each other, when they start roughhousing with mom, they're going to use their mouth and those sharp little puppy teeth, and they're going to bite. And if they bite gently with little to no pressure, their siblings are going to continue to play with them, and mom is going to at least tolerate them. If they bite too hard, their siblings are going to yelp and run away, and mom will probably reprimand them. And that is what bite inhibition is. It's learning to bite and use your mouth appropriately. And it's really important that we see puppies learn this skill, because otherwise we see juvenile and adult dogs that aren't intending harm. They're just using their mouth for play, but they're using their mouth too hard. Now, this is something that can be worked on as a juvenile or an adult, but if we can know that our puppy got that education with siblings and mom early on, we're just setting them up for future success without that added effort on our end. So it's really critical here that they remain with their litter mates. One of the saddest things I think I've ever seen is puppies that are 5 weeks old that are being weaned and sent home. And I have never seen one that has happened to develop into a healthy, stable adult dog without a lot of assistance from an owner and a professional trainer or behavioralist. Now, following our primary socialization stage, we have our secondary socialization stage, and that's 6 to 12 weeks. During this time, it is very important that the puppies get daily handling from people, and ideally many different people. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But this is really where puppies are going to form their opinions on humans. They're going to decide if they're friend or foe. They're going to decide if they're something to get excited about, to be bored with, or to be afraid of. During this phase, we should also see periodic separation from litter mates and also periodic separation from mom. So puppies are typically weaned right around 7 or 8 weeks. Some breeders will choose to keep puppies with mom a pinch longer, and that's fine as well. But we really want to start preparing puppies for that ultimate time when they're going to have to go out on their own. The rate of mental development during this stage will also depend on the environment. So if you do choose to go to a breeder or you go to a rescue or a shelter, if the puppies are in a very dull environment, no colors, no different textures, no sounds, and they spend their life in a very limited space, their mental development will be a bit delayed. And again, no reason to pass up the puppy, but it's just something to be aware of. You're going to have to work a little extra hard on providing them with stimulation to promote that brain growth and development. Now, training can also begin during the secondary socialization stage, and can really start between 5 and 6 weeks, with the caveat that you have appropriate expectations. So puppies at this age are going to be like human toddlers. They can pay attention to you for about 5 minutes before they need a new activity. So you can do short bursts of training sessions. You can start to work on house training, again, with the understanding that they can't physically hold their potty for very long. And you can start teaching basics like responding to names, sits, downs, even a little bit of recall, possibly some leash walking skills. Again, as long as your expectations are appropriate and you're limiting your training sessions to very short bursts. Now, during your socialization, particularly in that 7 to 12 weeks when they're going to be weaned from mom and removed from their siblings, this is really where you want to focus on human socialization. So most puppies are going to go home between 7 and 8 weeks. We could extend that even to about 10 weeks. That's usually the latest I've seen breeders separate puppies from mom. They will be completely weaned. And by their 49th day of development, puppy brainwaves are actually the same as an adult dog. So they are ready to learn, and they are just sponges soaking up information about their environment at this stage. So that's something that's very important to consider when you bring a puppy home. The way you bring your puppy home, how you have your home set up, and the training and socialization that you start from this point is going to be something that really is absorbed by your puppy, and it's going to stick with them likely through the entirety of their life. So socialization is critical. And respected trainer and behaviorist Ian Dunbar says that he sets a goal of 100 people in 100 days. Now, I agree with that concept with a few caveats. It's important that you capitalize on this time. So take your puppy sponge out to the world and let them absorb information, but it has to be positively done. So we have to make sure we're supporting our puppies, that we are providing them agency and making sure that they have choices in who or what they approach and who or what they choose to give some distance to. And either way, we want to make sure that we are heavily reinforcing, so lots of praise, lots of treats, to make sure that that puppy forms positive associations with all the people that they meet and all of the environmental stimuli that they encounter. But I can't stress enough, agency is key here, because this period of time is going to have the greatest impact on future social behaviors. So I want to share just a moment, an observation that I was able to make last summer. I was actually at a lake on the beach, and I saw a young man with his puppy, and I thought, how sweet. He's brought his puppy here to meet his friends, to experience some time on the beach, maybe play in the water if the puppy is comfortable. That's a great idea. So I thought, 2 thumbs up to this guy, excellent puppy owner. But he wanted to get the puppy used to the water, and he started to approach the lake, and the puppy became nervous and frightened and started to balk and kind of pull back against his harness. I would 100% expect that from a puppy. The lake is intimidating. Puppies don't have great depth perception. They don't know what that lake is about. They're going to be nervous about it. But rather than backpedaling to meet his puppy where his puppy felt most comfortable and rewarding that puppy for being calm at that distance, he instead, I'm sure with the very best of intentions, kept tugging on the leash and basically dragged his puppy up until his feet were in the water. It is highly likely, because that was a negative, frightening experience, even though it was done with the best of intentions, I'm sure, that that puppy is going to grow up and have an aversion to water because of that one singular negative experience. So it is very important that, to the best of your ability, you keep all socialization and all environmental stimuli as positive as possible, and we give our puppies the option to back away if they're uncomfortable, because otherwise we could be setting our puppies up for long-term fear and avoidance responses. Now, after 12 weeks So once we get to even just 13 weeks, that window for socialization is going to close. So if you are adopting a 16-week-old puppy, a 20-week-old puppy, even a, I don't know, a 6, 7, 8-month-old puppy, if they are feeling shy, if they're reserved, you can't flood them with 100 people in 100 days and expect a positive result. So dogs after 12 weeks cannot be socialized, but instead you're going to work on behavior modification to try to develop a more positive response to stimuli that they feel is frightening or something that just makes them feel a little nervous or shaky. So as another example, one of my dogs, I adopted from a shelter when he was about 3 years old. He had been in that shelter since he was 3 months old. He'd had very limited exposure to people. It was just the way that that shelter worked. He'd had no training, and he'd never left those grounds. So he hadn't seen anything of the world. He had missed all socialization markers his entire life. So when I got him, I wasn't surprised. He was terrified of everybody. And even initially, he was terrified of me. And he didn't want to leave the house once he had established a safe space. Now, I can't socialize him. And because of his lack of positive experiences during this developmental phase, he is never going to be that really outgoing dog that jumps and bounds all over the place and is so excited to meet new people. That's not going to be him. But with many months to, quite frankly, years in his case, of behavior modification, he can now greet people comfortably without trying to run away. And he has been positively reinforced that if he is nervous, to remove himself from the situation. So if I have company over and he is uncomfortable, he has an established safe space in our guest bedroom where he can go. And if he goes there, I know we need to leave him alone. We need to provide him with some calming music. He gets a treat in there. And it is his choice, because we provide agency, that he doesn't need to interact with those people. So if you are getting an older puppy and you are seeing some of those responses, in young puppyhood, the behavior modification will be more impactful. But just make sure you're setting, again, realistic expectations for your puppy. They are unlikely to grow into that wildly social, crazy about people dog. You're looking more for a dog that's going to be bonding with you and tolerating other people if they have missed that positive association with handling during this critical developmental stage. Now, I'm going to make this even more difficult for you. Some of these periods will overlap, and this is definitely one of those scenarios. So while you're in these socialization periods, puppies are also going to experience what is known as a fear period. Their first fear period occurs between 8 and 11 weeks. So I think we can already see where the problems occur here, because it's right around that time that they're getting weaned from mom, they're being separated from their litter mates, and they're striking out into the world and going to a new home. During their first fear period, puppies are going to be very sensitive to the stimuli that they encounter. And if they perceive an experience as traumatic, they tend to generalize it. And as a result, it's highly possible that they can develop an almost permanent avoidance response, and an avoidance response that will be permanent without intervention and behavior modification. So one soapbox moment that I'll have here, during this first fear period, when your puppy first comes home, please do not take them to a dog park. I see that happen very frequently. And again, it's done with the best of intentions. Folks think, hey, I'm going to get my puppy out. They're going to meet lots of dogs. They're going to see people. It's going to be awesome. But by and large, the puppies show up at the dog park. They almost immediately get knocked down by a bigger, older dog, or they get bombarded with children that are so excited to pet them. And that's terrifying. And in this stage, they're going to generalize that terror. So now they're going to be afraid of all dogs. They're not going to discriminate. One dog knocked me down and hurt me. So now I think all dogs are no fun and I don't want to play with them. Children rushed at me screaming. That was scary. All kids are now scary. So we want to make sure that we avoid those circumstances. Positive play and interactions are critical during this stage, but you want to make sure that you have as much control over the circumstances as you possibly can, so you can prevent your puppy from having a perceived traumatic experience and then generalizing that fear. Now, once you get through that 8 to 11 week period, and this is one case where all puppies are pretty much uniform. Every puppy goes through a fear period from 8 to 11 weeks. It lasts for 2 weeks, and they're pretty concrete. And when they start to develop the signs of a fear period, where they'll get a little nervous, they might try to back off a little bit. This is something that is universal amongst all puppies. Now, once you get through that, you might think, whew, that was tough, now I'm done. You're not. So puppies will also go through what's called a flight instinct period between about 4 to 8 months. Now, this can last for several weeks to even just a few days. During this phase, when I've worked with individuals that have brought a new puppy home, they'll get really frustrated, throw their hands up in the air and say, he's forgotten everything he's ever learned. He knew how to sit, lay down, he came when he was called, and now nothing. That is very common, and I'm sorry that we all have to go through it, but we all are going to if we bring a puppy home. Somewhere between 4 and 8 months, for at least a few days to several weeks to several months, your puppy is going to turn into a terror that seems deaf to any cues that you provide and seems to not know anything about anything. It's very common. You have to be patient. This is a great time to go back to your basics, reinforce what you knew you had down pat with your puppy. Just go back and you're going to do it all again. Puppies just need that reinforcement. It will help develop confidence, increase that bond they have with you. And then above all else, just be patient. So think about this flight instinct period as kind of a puppy's, we'll call it their tween years. So they're not quite teens. They're not throwing out the attitude that we see in teenagers, but they're flexing their independence muscles a little bit. They want to see how far away they can get from you. They want to see how long it can take before they come back when you call. They're not really testing boundaries in the sense that they're challenging you, but they're just exploring their own independence. So we need to positively reinforce behaviors that we like and really make it cool to hang out with us and spend time with us. So this is not a time to get frustrated. This is not a time to yell or punish. It's all about positivity so that puppy thinks, well, hey, even though I can be strong and independent, hanging out with mom is pretty awesome. So I'm going to keep doing that. Now, again, you might have thought you were done. Unfortunately, you're not. So most puppies go through a second fear period. Now, the second fear period is a little less specific than the first. It can occur anywhere from between 6 to 14 months. In my personal experience, 10 to 12 months is kind of the sweet spot where I see this occur most frequently, but I have seen it as young as 6. I've seen it as old as 14 months. So it really just kind of depends. And in the longevity of this period is also a lot more fluid. It can last for a few days, a few weeks. I don't typically see it last beyond maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but it certainly could. Now you'll know that your puppy has entered into this period if they start to demonstrate a rise in reactivity. So that means that perhaps you regularly walk your puppy around the block, you see neighbors and your puppy wiggles and wags at them, is pretty happy to see them. When they enter the second fear period, you're going to see the tail start to tuck. You might see your puppy growl or bark. They might lunge a little bit at strangers. They might be more reactive to people walking past the house, the sound of cars going by. And they may also start to become protective or territorial. So they might start saying, well, these are my toys. I don't want you to touch them. This is my food bowl. Get away from it. This is my yard. I want everybody out. It's very common. So again, just like our first fear period and our flight instinct period, we want to make sure we're not punishing. This is a normal developmental stage that dogs go through. We can't punish them for being dogs. We have to be understanding in what's going on and really make sure we're upping our positive reinforcement when they're encountering novel stimuli. So when they encounter a new person, if they look at them calmly, they're going to get a treat from you. If they willingly share toys, they're going to get some treats and some rewards for that. You have to make sure that you're positively reinforcing what you want and not punishing the puppy for simply just being a puppy and going through stages that all puppies go through. All right, so now that you've gotten through all of that, you're at the maturity stage. So you made it. Maturity is going to occur somewhere between 1 and 4 years, and that's going to be a little bit flexible depending on the breed. So small dogs actually reach maturity before our bigger dogs. So if you have a Chihuahua, they're typically considered mature, developed adults by the time they're about a year old. Dogs like, say, St. Bernards are going to take a little bit longer. So you're looking at that 2, 3, or 4 year mark before they are really settled in. They are who they are. You've now got a good understanding of their personality, likes and dislikes. For bigger dogs, that's going to be a lot more fluid for a longer period of time. Now, I'd like to remind everybody that there's still work to do there. So once you've gotten through puppyhood and you've gotten through those trying fear and flight periods, training should still continue. One, to continue establishing and developing that wonderful bond between you and your dog, but also to always be consistent with mental enrichment for our dogs. Keeping them mentally active and healthy will eliminate the potential for behavioral problems to sprout up later on in their life. So I always like to stress older dogs can learn new tricks. So my dogs learn something new every week. We work on a new skill. And although socialization periods have passed, so they're going to have pretty set beliefs in whether or not they think humans are great to be around or should be avoided. They're going to have pretty set opinions on whether or not it's cool to go out to strange places or better to stay at home. You can still use behavior modification to start mellowing out some of those maybe aversive reactions that you don't want to see in your dog. So if your dog is reactive and barking and lunging, we can still correct that. We're just going to go about it a slightly different way than we would when that puppy was in those prime socialization periods. Now, if you do see behaviors like that at a year plus, so barking, lunging at people, trying to hide from them, being very nervous about leaving the house or the yard, I will strongly encourage you to work with a professional trainer or behavioralist to make sure that you're approaching behavior modification in an appropriate and effective manner. Okay, so now you have learned the ins and outs of puppydom and hopefully have an understanding of how complex their growth process really is. And so hopefully that will help us be more empathetic with our puppies as they struggle and as they get into trouble. So now we need to talk a little bit about what should be considered before you choose a puppy. And of course, one of the first things I like to address is where we get the puppy from. So you can adopt or you can shop. Now, I, of course, am a shelter employee, so we're going to start off by talking about the perks of adoption. So one, you get to save 2 lives, which is pretty awesome. It makes us all feel good. You get to save the life of the puppy you're bringing home, and you get to save the life of another animal that now has a space to go in a shelter or a rescue. Typically, adoption fees are going to be a lower cost than what you would pay at a pet store or with a breeder. And in many cases, medical care is already completed. So for example, at DuPage and every shelter and rescue that I'm aware of in the area, if you adopt a puppy, they'll already be spayed or neutered, they'll be microchipped, and they'll be up to date on age-appropriate vaccines and dewormers. Now, you may have to take that over and continue any boosters that are still needed, depending on the age of your puppy, but at least that foundation will have been laid for you and will be included in the adoption fee. And then additionally, you get to work with a really awesome supportive team of shelter and rescue employees or volunteers. So at DuPage, for example, we stand by our pets. If you have an issue or a question in a week, in 2 weeks, in 3 years, we are there to listen and provide as much guidance as we possibly can. Now I hear all the time, but I want a purebred dog. And I get it. I grew up watching Homeward Bound and I needed a golden retriever when I was growing up. So I understand that desire for a very specific type of dog, but you can rescue one. So shelters do see a fair number of purebred dogs. We certainly do at DuPage. And there are countless breed-specific rescues all across the country that will specialize in one particular type of breed and only have either purebred or mixed breeds with that one breed included in the mix available for adoption. Now, a perk for going to a breed-specific rescue is they are going to be experts on that breed. So they are going to be an excellent source of information to prepare you for all of that puppy's care needs. Now, if you do choose to go the purchasing route, again, no judgment, we all have to do what is right for us, but I will ask you to say no to commercially bred pets, which means steer clear of pet store puppies. They're typically going to come from reputable breeders, which can set you up for a whole slew of problems later on. Reputable breeders that are just commercially breeding dogs for profit do not pay attention to bloodlines. So in many cases, we see a lot of dogs that are very highly inbred, and they're not breeding for breed characteristics. So you'll see a lot of dogs that don't meet breed standards, and in many cases have congenital or hereditary defects that have just been continuously bred into that line because they're just trying to sell a cute puppy quickly to make some money. And if we do choose to purchase from a commercial breeder, we're also using our money to vote for the breeding and housing practices, which look like this. And we don't want to leave moms and dads in these conditions to continually be bred. And we certainly don't want to bring home a puppy that started out their life and hit many critical developmental markers in this type of environment. It's not uncommon for puppies that come from puppy mills to develop behavioral issues later on in life that are all a result of this start that they had. So you really want to avoid this. If you do want to go with a purebred and you're interested in purchasing and not adopting, make sure you choose a responsible breeder. So to help you make that distinction between responsible and commercial, you really want to do a couple key things. First and foremost, you want to meet the breeder. And in many cases, reputable breeders will make this a requirement. So even if they're in another state, they're going to require that you come to them because they also want to get a feel for who you are before they send one of their puppies to your home. Now, when you meet the breeder, you want to take that opportunity to tour their facilities. And there should not be a single area in that facility that is not available for you to see. While you're taking a tour, take note. Are the facilities clean? Is there a lot of dog waste around, or does that seem like that's well under control? Are their food and water bowls clean? What does the environment look like? Do you notice a bad smell? See if you're allowed to meet the animals. If the breeder says, well, here's a puppy, but you don't need to meet mom and dad or my other breeding dogs, that's a red flag. You want to see where mom and dad live, you want to see where the other animals live, and you want to see where your puppy grew up so you can assess if their developmental stages were being supported as they grew. When you get to meet the animals, you want to see how they appear. Are they clean and of healthy weight like you see for the dog of breeder A? Or do they look dirty and ungroomed and malnourished like you can see for the dog from breeder B? You also want to assess, how do the animals interact with the breeder? Are they excited to see the breeder? Do they seem comfortable with the breeder? That's a good indicator of whether or not that individual has actually spent the time necessary to socialize their dogs and spend that critical time with the puppies that they need. How do they interact with you? Are they nervous around you? Because that might be a tell that their stimulation has been very limited, maybe only to the breeder, him or herself. Now, again, that's not a reason to immediately pass by a puppy, but it's just something to be aware of when you bring that puppy home. They've missed some socialization markers and they might need a little extra support to get out in the world and be a confident social dog. Now, when you're there with the breeder, make sure you ask questions. So come with a list and gauge how willing the breeder is to provide answers. A reputable breeder is going to talk your ear off about their breeding program, the bloodlines that they've chosen, how they're trying to emphasize the best traits of the breed. They're going to want to share their knowledge and information with you. If they're evasive or seem irritated or put off by the questions, personally, I wouldn't be purchasing from that particular breeder. And of course, make sure you meet the parents. So not just all the other dogs at the facility, but the parents of the puppy you're hoping to bring home. Breeders should allow you to meet mom and dad, should allow you to socialize with them. And assessing mom and dad can give you a good idea of the potential temperament for your puppy. Now, of course, all animals are individuals and genetics only plays some of a role in developing who they are, but it is a factor. And so you do want to see how mom and dad are. Are they friendly? Are they social? Are they confident? If they're elusive and trying to hide or seem skittish, a lot of that tension and anxiety about the environment or strangers is going to be relayed to their puppy. So we're already starting our puppy off on kind of a bad foot. And again, can be totally correctable, but it might mean a little extra work on your end. You also want to ask for a complete medical history, and not just for puppy, but for mom and dad as well. So you can get a sense of the health of the bloodline that you're selecting a puppy from. You can make sure that mom was healthy throughout the course of her pregnancy, that the delivery went smoothly. And of course, you want to check and make sure that your puppy has received age-appropriate dewormers and vaccinations up to the point where you are bringing them home. And then I have to stress, when you're going to a reputable breeder, you have to be patient. So I know for some folks, going to an adoption facility can be off-putting because many shelters and rescues have a fairly lengthy adoption application. There might be home checks involved. There's some hoops that you have to jump through. But a quality breeder is going to provide you with the same types of hoops. So purchasing through a responsible breeder shouldn't be a quick process. There likely will be an application. They may want to check out your home as well. Now, they may not physically come, but they might ask for pictures. I've seen that happen very frequently. And And you may also find with a reputable breeder that they are not going to allow you to actually select the puppy from the litter. They're going to ask you some questions. They're going to get a feel about your household, your energy level, your expectation and desire for a puppy. And they're going to try to choose an animal from their litter that they think is a best match. And if you find a breeder willing to do that, trust what they have to say, because they've been in this field for a long time. They've got a good sense of the animals that they're breeding. They'll have spent time with the puppies, and they're almost always 100% spot on with matching families and pups. Now, when you are picking your puppy and you're sharing information with a breeder or a shelter or a rescue and having them help you decide what would be the best fit, please make sure that you are being honest. So talk it out with your family and really decide what your energy level is. I think this is one of the factors that is most damaging to puppy and family relationships. A lot of folks think that they're high energy, and most of the times they're not quite spot on. And high energy for us is sometimes a lot different than what we consider high energy for people. So the dog pictured here on the slide is actually mine. Her name is Lulabelle. She is a soon-to-be 4-year-old cattle dog that was actually surrendered to the shelter where I work. She was basically an example of all the things you should not do with a puppy. So her previous owners were very well-meaning, but they impulse purchased a puppy from Petland. So that means Lulabelle came from a puppy mill. She missed a lot of developmental markers growing up. She experienced a pretty traumatic transfer event, lived in a pet store, and then was brought home with individuals that were very poorly prepared for a puppy in general, but especially unprepared for a cattle dog puppy. So cattle dogs are working dogs. They are typically extremely high energy. Lulabelle definitely fits the bill there, and they're insanely intelligent. So they need a ton of mental stimulation. Now, Lulabelle, I'm sure, was just stinking adorable when she was a puppy, so I get the impulse, but they brought her home without any preparation, did not take her to training, and expected her to live in a rather small 1-bedroom apartment. That didn't work well. Lulabelle became destructive. She was hyperactive, wouldn't let her family settle down. And she also had developed pretty significant stranger danger, which meant she was highly reactive to any people outside of her household, simply because she had never been properly socialized. And those behaviors and the lack of preparedness from her owners ultimately resulted in her being surrendered to a shelter. Now, I was able to take her home, intending really just to foster her and work with her. But of course, now fast forward 1.5 years and she's still mine, but I'm prepared for her. So we work on training for an hour or more every day. We either walk or run, typically about 10 miles a day. We do a lot of other physical enrichment. She's trained in agility, and I do a lot of mental engagement with food puzzles and all sorts of other games that I play with her. And frankly, that's what she needs. So she needs a time investment from her handler of about 3 to 4 hours a day. I knew that going in, and I was prepared for it, and a working dog fits my lifestyle very well, but it doesn't fit a lot of other people's lifestyles. So please make sure when you're considering energy level, you're being very honest about what you think you'll be able to commit to, not just while your puppy is young, but for the entirety of their lives. You also want to consider availability to provide care. That is definitely going to play a role when you're selecting dogs. If you don't think you're going to commit a lot to grooming, then please don't get a dog that's got a lot of fur or dogs that are prone to matting. You want to make sure that you're going to be able to keep up with their hygiene needs. Also think about your commitment to training. So all puppies should definitely, without question, go to training classes, but you really do want to continue that through the entirety of your pet's life. Even if you learn some skills and you apply that at home on your own, you want to make sure that you can commit to that lifelong training. And then, of course, consider your financial investment. So all puppies are going to be pretty uniform in their booster and dewormer needs. If you're getting from a breeder, you're likely going to need to spay or neuter. So that's a financial investment you'll have to consider. But if you are looking for a specific breed, also consider any associated health issues. So I always use English Bulldogs as an example. They're adorable. I love them. There's really nothing cuter than a bulldog puppy. But I always joke with everybody that if you adopt or purchase a bulldog puppy, you just got yourself $1 million dog. They are notorious for respiratory infections, for skin infections, and for generalized allergies. So your vet visits are likely, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, to be frequent and potentially expensive. So just make sure that you're prepared for that as you bring your puppy home. We always, of course, fingers crossed, will be bringing home completely healthy puppies. But as they grow into adults, we might see some of these health issues arise, and we need to be financially prepared for them. And then, of course, consider space. So again, this is definitely something that was an issue with Lulabelle. When she came into that one-bedroom apartment as a puppy, I'm sure there was ample room for her to run about and to play and to explore. But as she grew, it became very limiting and restrictive for her, which led to some behavioral outbursts that were not well received by her owners. So you want to make sure that your household fits your puppy and also the size of the adult dog that they will one day become. Now, a very common question that I get is, does breed matter? So when I'm selecting a dog, do I need to be concerned with breed? And my answer is, not really. So all dogs are individuals. And when we talk about behavior, it's really a very complex topic. So behavior is going to be developed from an interaction of your puppy's genetics and their environment. So we have that nature versus nurture discussion. And really what ends up being the result of that discussion is that both nature and nurture are going to affect how your dog behaves. So in some cases, it is a good idea to know the typical qualities you'll find in a specific breed, as long as in the back of your mind, you're always keeping this mantra that every dog is an individual going in your brain. So you want to make sure that you know what to expect from a typical cattle dog, for example, but the cattle dog in front of you, again, they didn't read the book, so they don't know what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to act. So you have to look at the individual. Now, sometimes knowing a breed can be helpful because it can set you up with some basic expectations. So size is a big one. If you get a Chihuahua, you know they're going to be relatively small. If you get a Great Dane, you have now signed yourself up for a horse living in your home. So that can be something we can learn from breed. We can also set some fairly standard expectations for shedding. So how much care do I have to put into grooming needs? A general expectation for longevity. So again, a Chihuahua doesn't surprise me when I find out that they're 18 years old, but I've never really seen a Great Dane get past maybe 10 or 11 maximum. You'll also be able to get an idea about typical health problems that the breed may encounter, and you might get some general ideas on temperament. Again, keeping in mind that every dog is an individual, so we might have some expectations for how a dog would respond to certain stimuli, but you do have to look at the individual animal in front of you. So some things that I will put fairly reliably with breed is energy level. So if you are looking at a working dog, cattle dogs is a big example there, German Shepherds, Malinois, Border Collies, these are all dogs that we have bred for centuries to do a job for us and to work hard. And we really haven't changed breed standards, even though many of us have stopped using dogs as a working partner and really just want them as companions. So many of these dogs come into homes and they struggle. And again, there's always exceptions to that rule, as we would expect, but make sure you're prepared for that. Especially on the mental enrichment side, you need to keep the brains of these working breed dogs very, very busy, or they're going to find ways to entertain themselves, which is usually not in line with what we'd like them to be doing. You also want to consider what the dog was bred to do, because they may demonstrate certain behaviors that shouldn't be surprising and that you may have to work with to meet your needs. So I'll use cattle dogs again as an example because I have one in my home and I have dealt with her issues. But Lulabelle is a cattle dog. They have been bred to herd, and more specifically, they've been bred to use their mouth to herd. So you can see the cattle dog pictured at the top of the slide with his mouth wrapped around that very unhappy cow's leg. That's what they were bred to do. They use bite to move cows from one location to another. So it's not uncommon for cattle dogs to be mouthy dogs when they get excited. And when I brought Lulabelle home, that was certainly the case. I would come through the door when I got home from work, and I would have a 60-pound dog jumping at me and nipping my arms, nipping my legs, not trying to do me harm. She's just excited, and her first inclination is to use her mouth. So I'm not going to be able to get her to stop being mouthy. She was bred to be mouthy. I can't punish her for being mouthy because that's not her fault. But what I can do is work with that behavior that I know she's going to demonstrate and put it towards a positive outlet. So with Lulabelle, we spend a lot of time working on picking up a toy when she's excited. So now when I come home, she usually doesn't even meet me at the door because she has run to her toy box because she's so excited she needs a squeaky toy. And then she charges back at me and I hear squeak, 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 squeak because she's using that mouth on the toy instead of me. So you just have to consider that when you are bringing home a purebred dog or even a mixed breed dog that demonstrates some strong characteristics of one breed. They may not all do this, but understanding what your dog was bred to do will help you understand where behaviors are coming from and learn how to effectively manage them. But again, I'm going to stress to avoid breed generalizations. So it's a good idea to know what the standard is, but also accept that your individual dog has never read those standards. So they may or may not meet them. You want to prepare yourself, but also be willing to be pleasantly surprised by the dog in front of you. Now, once you've decided on where you're going to be acquiring your puppy and what type of dog you'd like to have in your home, now you have to prepare for them. And so the first thing that you're going to need to do is get your supplies in order. So everything you need for your puppy should be identified and purchased before your puppy comes home. You'll be able to identify those needs through research and conversations with pet professionals, ideally the pet professionals that are actively raising your puppy. So talk to the breeder, talk to the shelter or the rescue. You'll be able to identify what foods they've been exposed to so far, what treats, what toys, and you really want to stock your home with things that are familiar to that puppy. If you need to change things like food, that's fine. Do it a little later on and do it gradually so we don't have any digestive upset and we're not rocking that puppy's world any more than is strictly necessary. This will help your new puppy settle in and feel more comfortable in a new home. So my next soapbox moment for this presentation is that your new puppy should not be making a trip to a pet store with you. That is a tragic error that I see a lot of new puppy owners make. They pick up the puppy and they take them to a pet store. That is so overwhelming. So the stores are huge, they have echoes, they smell a lot. There's going to be a lot of smells there. There's going to be other dogs, possibly other different types of animals. And the minute you walk through the door with a puppy, everybody in that store is going to hone in on you and want a pet. That is too much for a young dog and can, again, set them up for some pretty significant fear responses to people, to new locations, and any other manner of stimuli that they may encounter. So have things first, bring your puppy directly home when you pick them up. Now, when you bring your puppy home, you don't want to just release them into the house. Their exposure to the home needs to be done gradually, and they will need some time to decompress and settle in and learn their routines when they come home. So you really do want to have an established safe space for them that's quiet and off the beaten path whenever possible. That space should be vacuumed and dusted before your puppy comes home. It should be temperature controlled to maximize your puppy's comfort, and it should be puppy proofed, meaning nothing that they can chew or get tangled up in. Now to set that space up, you can use a variety of different supplies. So I love exercise pens. Whenever I've fostered young dogs, I will set up an exercise pen for them, and that's the space that they're going to live in for a little while they get used to the home. Exercise pens are great because you can play a lot with their size and shape, so they can really fit anywhere in your house. If you prefer, you can use baby gates and give them an entire room to themselves as well. In that safe space, you want to make sure that you have a crate or a cage, or at very least a nice comfy bed for them. They should have accessible food and water and ample enrichment items, so different textures, different toys, anything that can help keep their brains busy and developing. So this is an example of a good safe space. So this puppy is being contained in an exercise pen, so his space availability in the house is limited. He's got plenty of toys, he's got a comfy bed, there's a crate right there. We don't see food or water, but I'll assume that it's in there. The only things I would change about this is this puppy's safe space has been set up in a kitchen, which is a high traffic area. That's going to make it very difficult for your puppy to settle, which is an important skill that they need to learn. Additionally, you can see the adult dog right on the other side of that gate. While you will allow that interaction eventually, it should not occur immediately when the puppy comes home. Let the puppy rest and settle in, get used to this new home and the new routine, and then you can start introducing the pets. You want to make sure that your environment is kept as calm as possible. So you'll avoid bright overhead lights, rely on natural light whenever possible. And I cannot stress enough the power of music. So there have been a number of scientific studies that have demonstrated for all animals that low soothing sounds can encourage relaxation. Typically, we fall back on classical music to meet these needs, but recent scientific studies have shown that animals also positively respond to soft rock and reggae. So if either of those are more to your taste, have at it. Just make sure that we're keeping the tones very low. Our puppies' ears are still developing. Their sense of hearing is actually very acute at this time, and they can be sensitive to jarring noises, especially during those fear periods. So keep it calm, keep it soothing, and keep it quiet. So we should barely be able to hear it. The puppy can hear it just fine. And then we also have to remember that dogs have a very powerful sense of smell. So dogs have about 300 million scent receptors in their nose. We have just a measly 6 million or so. So our nose is useless, but puppies are going to gain a lot of information about their home and determine their comfort level largely based on how it smells. So we can help them out and make the home as appealing as possible using pheromone diffusers. So Adaptil is a brand that I know and use regularly. There are a few other choices out there, as well as some other aromatherapy options that you could use. But if you are going the aromatherapy option, please make sure that you are conferring with a veterinarian to make sure the scents you're choosing are safe and are in fact relaxing for a puppy. If you do go the diffuser route, Adaptil is great. They use naturally occurring pheromones. And they actually use maternal canine pheromone, which is the pheromone released by mom when puppies are nursing. So having that scent established in a puppy safe space will make them feel right at home and more likely to relax in that area. It's also a good trick so you can get some decent night's sleep when the puppy comes home. Now, when you are heading home with your puppy, you want to make sure you're providing as much agency as possible. So allow time for your puppy to enter the car, and keep in mind that for many puppies, this may actually be their first car ride. So we want it to be positive so we don't set them up for negative reactions to cars later on. Let them choose when to approach the car, reward them, lots of praise, lots of treats. Ultimately, because of the puppy size, you're probably going to have to pick them up and scoop them into the car, but make sure they're comfortable. And even with that picking up process, let them come to you. Have them climb into your lap by choice, then scoop them up. Try to keep your puppy contained. They don't really have their sea legs yet, so if they're just loose in the back seat, they're likely to flop around and fall. And again, we're setting them up to form negative associations with car rides. We can still use soft music and aromatherapy in our vehicles to help encourage a calm, relaxing environment. And when you are going to pick up your puppy, resist the urge to bring the entire family, especially if you have kiddos. I know they're going to want to be there. That first car ride home is super exciting, but having too many bodies and too many voices and too much motion in a car can be very overwhelming for a puppy. So you want to keep that car ride comfortable, calm, quiet, and to 1 to 2 people maximum in the vehicle. And when you do arrive home, make sure you allow for ample exploration time and an opportunity to go potty before they get into the house. Remember, potty habits are still being formed. Puppies are going to be very excited. They just got jiggled around in a car for however long they were traveling. They're going to have to potty, and you're going to want to let them do that outside. Again, heavy on the praise, rather than bring them right inside, have them get overexcited or overwhelmed, and then piddle on the floor. We're setting them up for failure, and we want to try to avoid doing that whenever possible. Okay. So now you've got your puppy home and you're ready to start your adventure together. So first, you have to make sure that you are setting realistic expectations for the goals you want to reach with your puppy. Your puppy is going to need time to settle in, to get to know you, and to understand the routine of your household. Stay positive, always, and make sure you're moving at your puppy's pace. So I know I spent a significant amount of time talking about developmental stages. They are pretty uniform amongst dogs, but everybody's an individual. So if your puppy's struggling with a particular task, if house training is taking longer than you thought it would, work with your puppy at their pace and try not to get frustrated with setbacks. I know that's easier said than done, but you're likely going to encounter that when you're working with your puppy. You're going to take 3 steps forward and then 10 backwards. So it's always going to be a little bit of a yo-yo as your puppy develops, but if you stick with it and you stay positive and upbeat, you're going to have a really well-developed, healthy, and confident dog at the end. Now, I have to emphasize the importance of training. That should be attended as soon as possible. So give your puppy a couple of days to a week to settle into your home, and then it's time to go to training. It'll help establish a bond with you and your family. So when we're talking about training classes, I will share some key points that you should be hitting with your training class. If your puppy training class is just going into a room, sitting in a circle and working on sit down, come, and maybe go to bed sort of cues, that is not enough, and that is not an effective puppy class. Puppy classes should, one, encourage the entire family to attend. So dogs do not generalize well. So if only one person works with them, they're only going to learn those behaviors from that one person. And so if mom is taking puppy to classes, when puppy comes home and kiddos ask the puppy to sit, puppy's going to look at them blankly and say, I have no idea what you're saying to me. They don't generalize. So having the whole family there will make sure that the puppy understands that learning is for everybody. It'll also help establish that bond with the whole family and not just one individual. You're also going to be establishing a foundation for future learning. So puppy classes really need to hit a lot of key factors. So not just those basic obedience cues, but we need to make sure that puppy classes are incorporating exposure to new stimuli. So when I have taught puppy classes in the past, we might still be working on basic cues like a sit or a down or a touch. But while puppy guardians are working on that, I'm walking around the room with a vacuum cleaner, or I've got a box fan turned on, or I've laid a tarp on the ground for the puppies to walk over so they're getting a new sensation or a new sound. We want to see those exposures done in incremental, gentle ways during training classes. Puppy training classes should also incorporate puppy playtime. So that way puppies can develop positive associations with other similarly sized dogs and will learn how to play appropriately. And a trained professional will be able to identify if a puppy is becoming overwhelmed or stressed and be able to positively redirect and possibly break up play sessions. So this should help with socialization. But if you go to a puppy class where they're all isolated and in their own areas, we're not getting those benefits. So make sure you do start training, but make sure you select your training classes with care. Okay, so I went over a little bit. I'm so sorry. There's a lot of things to cover with puppies, but I am all set to answer any questions that you may have. So let me go ahead and open up the Q&A section. All right. So as a soon-to-be first-time puppy or dog owner, do you recommend purchasing a preventative care plan with unlimited exams, yearly vaccinations, et cetera, from the vet? Honestly, I've used those for my dogs. And I have thought they were to be pretty successful, especially if you are getting a young dog that is going to require a lot of boosters. Sometimes purchasing that care plan can be a little nicer to your wallet than having to pay for them individually. But what I would really focus on more than the care plans offered is just look at the quality of the veterinary care. So I am a big fan of scoping out my vet hospitals before I bring my dogs in. So I typically make appointments with vets before I have my animal ready to go. And I go in, I talk to the vet, I snoop around as much as I'm allowed in the facility. I want to make sure it's clean. I want to see how staff are handling the dogs. And especially in this day and age where everybody is much better educated about dog body language, dog behavior, and dog social needs, you should be looking for a vet that practices cooperative care, which means they don't use force. So if your puppy needs a nail trim and is resistant, they're not going to take them in back and lay them down and put their elbows on them and hold them down. They're going to provide you with solutions to have a more cooperative, healthy, and fun experience. But all in all, if you are looking for some of those care plans, in puppydom, I find them to be very cost effective. For adults, you have to really watch the dollar signs there, because sometimes those care plans are not as positive for you as you would hope they would be. Okay. So another question, should we talk to our vets on special food brands or what they would recommend? I definitely think that's a good conversation to have with your vet. A lot of vets will be a little bit prone to one suggestion over another. They will always go with what's worked for them specifically. So what I would recommend, even more than talking to the vet, if you're getting from a breeder, talk to the breeder. If you are getting from a shelter or rescue, talk to them about what they've been feeding and see if they have suggestions for any changes that could be made. A veterinarian can definitely weigh in on that as well. When you are feeding a puppy, you definitely want to make sure that you are getting puppy specific food, as they have very, very specific nutritional needs that are going to be fairly drastically different from an adult dog's. So you just want to make sure that you are meeting those requirements. And ultimately, feeding is going to largely come down to personal choice. So everybody's got some different opinions on what they want to feed and what works for their dogs. So I know I used to have very rigid opinions about feeding that I have completely flip-flopped on now based on the dogs that I have in my own home and meeting their specific needs. So with puppies, you'll probably find that you're going to do some trial and error in your own home, see what settles best with them, see what they're most interested in, see what gives them the healthiest stools. If you're seeing a lot of diarrhea, you're seeing bloated bellies, you've got bad breath, especially in puppies, that's usually an indicator that that food is not sitting well with them, and you may need to research and do some changing. Okay, so I think I have hit all of the questions. Oh, I've got another one. Do you have any recommendations for bringing a new puppy to a home with another pet, such as an adult cat? Yes. So one, please feel sympathy for that cat. That is a lot for them to take on. So slow and steady is going to win the race for any introductions with new animals. So especially if you're bringing a puppy into a home where there's another animal, particularly if it's an adult animal, you want to make sure that that puppy is contained. So that safe space is going to be critical, not only just for the puppy to adjust and settle in, but for your existing pet to just accept the fact that you have brought home a pint-sized monster that's going to terrorize them. So when you set up that safe space, especially if you have another pet in the house, it is important that the puppy is a little bit isolated. And I don't mean that to be mean to the puppy, but we want to make sure that our existing animal knows that their home is still their home and it's their space. And so puppy's going to exist a little bit off that beaten path, and we're going to prevent any direct interactions with them, at least initially. Now, my preference is to keep that separation for 2 weeks. So in shelters and rescues, we call that a 2-week shutdown. That is my preference, and it has been scientifically supported to be effective. However, again, all animals are individuals. So if your adult cat says, oh, hey, puppy, that's cool, then you can certainly shorten that separation period. But if you keep the puppy in a separate area, have a barrier, a door in between puppy and existing pet, that will allow them to actually slowly start to acclimate to each other through sound and scent before they ever see each other face to face. Then over time, you can start to open the door. There's still going to be a barrier in that baby gate or exercise pen that the puppy is existing in, but now they can see each other. There could be some tactile interaction, so they might touch noses. The cat might reach in there and swat the puppy. That's very common, and that's okay. So you want to let them kind of work some of that out on their own. You can encourage positive interactions by starting to feed near each other. So if puppy is enclosed in, say, an exercise pen, you can put their food dish right by the edge of that pen, and then you can feed your cat near the pen. And you can gauge your cat's comfort level by their willingness to approach and eat their food. So if you put it right next to the pen and the cat says, no, thank you, I'll skip dinner this evening, your cat's not comfortable with the puppy yet. So move that dish back 5 or 6 feet and see if the cat will come and approach there. And work with them at their distance where they're comfortable with. And you can slowly start to work that back together. When your puppy is ready to start exploring the house, you're going to want to make sure that your cat has plenty of safe spaces. So that's going to be anywhere up high. So cat trees, furniture, make sure they've got ample areas to get up and away from the puppy, and that there's no areas in the house where they might get boxed in or trapped. And then I firmly recommend that anytime puppy is loose in the house or outside of that exercise pen or other safe space area, they should be on a leash, because we're not going to let that puppy chase the cat. Because if the puppy chases the cat, that's already going to be self-rewarding, because chasing the cat is going to be, quite frankly, a blast. And so no matter what you do, that puppy's going to go, nope, this is fun, I'm going to chase the cat. And we don't want that, because we don't want the cat to be stressed. And we certainly don't want the cat to feel like they have to turn around and swipe at that puppy, possibly causing damage and also setting that puppy up for a negative response to the cat. So puppy should be on leash, and we're going to use a lot of food rewards. So if puppy looks at the cat, they're going to get treats. So way to go for looking at that cat and not trying to chase them. Here's your treats. It's a good time to work on some training. So if the cat's loose in the living room, bring the puppy out on a leash, start working on what they know. Sit down, come, touch, whatever the behavior might be, and reward them. So that way they learn that the cat can be there and it's to their benefit to ignore the cat and pay attention to you. And you're going to want to do that slowly over a course of time, gauging your cat's comfort level and your puppy's ability to focus on you and start to ignore the cat. And then once you've achieved that, where the puppy is nonchalant about the cat's non-threatened by the puppy, then you can start to slowly incorporate off-leash supervised time in the same space. Hopefully that helps. Sometimes it can be tricky incorporating a puppy into a home with other animals, but patience and going slow is going to get you a long way in the long run. So definitely make sure that you are taking things slowly.